Welcome to those of you who are listening to the recording. For those of you who don't know me, and I do see a few people that I know, my name is Andy Winter, and I'm a principal of Mobius Executive Leadership and part of the Mobius Leadership Council. I'm based in Basel in Switzerland, and when I'm not being principal, I do a lot of top team work and personal mastery work and facilitator development and so on, trusted advisor work. But today I am super delighted to introduce a dear friend of mine and colleague and teacher and mentor, Lisa Doig. As some of you may know, Lisa is a pioneer in the field of values, linking personal transformation, business transformation, and levels of consciousness. So I met Lisa, and we were going back quite a while in 2003 in South Africa, when Lisa came to help support the grooming and development of African facilitators for McKinsey & Company, who were being trained by Guy de Bellen. And I remember at the time being, not only struck by how precise and attuned and powerful Lisa is as a teacher and a colleague, but also how she truly, and I mean this sincerely, truly embodies the values and lives what she teaches, which for me is very trustworthy. And so over the years, Lisa and I have taught together in various locations around the world, and Lisa's attuned capacity to just know how to meet somebody exactly where they need to be met, and then to help them notice what is the next close-in step in, as a gateway to the next level of their own potential is extraordinary. So not only that, she is one of the most innovative people I know in terms of developing new processes, new ways of teaching that are both accessible to business leaders and are profoundly transformational. She is co-founder of Corporate Evolution and the creator of Facilitating Transformation Through Values, which is a facilitated development program that Corporate Evolution have run now for a number of years, hugely successfully. For the past 19 years, Lisa has been designing and implementing leadership and culture change programs globally, both as Director of Corporate Evolution and also as part of the McKinsey external network of transformational facilitators. Her niche particularly is working with top teams, linking vision and values with strategy and whole systems change. Before that, Lisa, actually to her leadership work, Lisa spent 20 years in the oil and gas and environmental industries, developing new divisions for overseas companies, from market research through strategy and multi-million-dollar sales and operations. So we are absolutely delighted that Lisa will join us at the annual gathering of the Mobius Next Practice Institute, which takes place in October. In fact, the week of October 15th this year, where she will lead a week-long immersion by the same name as today's introductory workshop, which, as I know you all know, is The Power of Values as Your Evolutionary Force. And thank you, Lisa, for hosting this taster, this hour-and-a-half taster for us. There are still a handful of spaces available in this year's event. So a couple of pointers before I hand over to Lisa. One, if you have already signed up for the Next Practice Institute and a track, and you decide you want to switch to Lisa's track, you can still do that. You'd simply go to the registration confirmation you received from Mobius Executive Leadership and then scroll down to view or modify your registration. And Lindsay Cannon, our very able and helpful logistics manager for this, will actually put it in the chat. There it is. Right, so if you wanted to switch. And then secondly, for those of you who haven't yet signed up for this annual gathering and you would like to, we're going to share in a moment in the chat Amy Fox, the CEO of Mobius's keynote address from last year's annual gathering, which really shares the purpose of why we come together for a week of practice, of renewal, of friendship, peer learning, and in the company of leaders in their fields of expertise across various transformational disciplines. So thanks, Lindsay, for putting that on the chat. So I know that Lisa has got a wonderful hour and 20 minutes. So now I hand over to you, my dear friend and colleague, Lisa Doig.
Thank you, Andy. That is so nice. And I miss you dearly, as you know.
Me too.
So thank you for the introduction. And thank you to Mobius for, allowing this to happen and inviting me to the NPI. So I'm very excited by that. I have deep respect for Mobius and for you, obviously, Andy. So thank you so much. Just a few things. I've got Malcolm here, who's my partner. He's also here, and Renu Burr, who's also one of our mentors, who teaches the FTV with me. So if you just wave your hand, Renu, you could see who's here to be of service if you like. I'm just curious. So with the people here, I'm curious how many. Oh, there's Thomas. Hello, Thomas. I'm curious about, if you come from the facilitation background or you come from organization, if I could just see a hands up, how many of you are facilitators and are interested in this from your kind of facilitation work? Thank you. Good to see. And how many of you are coming from organizations interested in values as part of your like HR or people development? Okay, good. So it's both. Thank you. Great. Well, I guess my passion, what I'd like to share with you today is why I'm passionate about values for leadership and organizational culture change, and really the depth of what sits within the values work. So that's my intention for kind of use the word infecting you with my passion today. And hopefully, you could see some lights in there for the work that you do. So I'm just going to share my screen. And really what I like to do is provide the context and the roadmap around the values work, and then actually give you an experience. So reflect on something that you're challenged with, struggling with, something that you haven't been able to answer. And we'll use the values work to give you an experience of the insights that you can gain from that. So that's my purpose, is to make this very real and accessible for you, and, and feel free to use the same exercise for your clients. So I'm going to jump in here and take you through the program. Can everybody see this? Okay. Yeah. So my plan here is to first give you the context of the values and consciousness roadmap. We'll do an exercise together and really reflect and get on the balcony and see why I've called this title Values as Your Evolutionary Force. So just in terms of raw context, I figure if you're here, you must be very aware of complexity, leadership, culture change, and the disruption that we're living in today. I love this quote from Bob Anderson. How many people are familiar with Bob and Leadership Circle? Yes, love his work. And what he says is an organization will not perform at a higher level than the consciousness of its leaders. And so the power of this values work is how to help leaders expand their consciousness in a way that's accessible to them. So for those who, let's say, have not entered the spiritual work or some of the deep leadership work, how do we engage with leaders in a way that doesn't scare them away, but also as an opening to their spiritual awareness? And so this is really the key piece. When I first came into this, I was a workaholic perfectionist, perfect wife, perfect mother, perfect everything, and I collapsed at 40. And I came onto the program that McKinsey was doing at Malcolm's company, Woodside Energy. And I came on that weekend course with Geeta Bell and McKinsey. And I saw that Barrett model of 7 levels, and my whole body started shaking. So I knew there was something in this. And in the span of 3 days, my entire life changed. My whole level of reality changed. So I knew there was something in this model. And that's really what we've done, is we've taken a lot of the leadership thinking, ancient wisdom, and integrated into a very simple methodology. So to make this practical for you, as a starting point, just reflect for yourself. Maybe you have a piece of paper. What's the biggest challenge that you're facing at the moment? What do you lose sleep over? What would you love to be able to do? What's the thing that, when you go to sleep at night, you're still thinking about it, worrying about it? So just have a starting point, and maybe to share with the group here, we could put it in the chat box. Maybe if a few people would put in the chat, what's the thing you want to work on today? So if you have a chance, just put that in the chat box and we'll go from there. I might call on a few people who I know, if that's okay. Thomas, I'm going to ask you, what's the biggest challenge you're working on today?
I was writing. You want to hear it?
Sure, why not? It's nice to hear a voice.
I think, the meditation spiritual practice, to actually really integrate it into my life, and that in the context of what is the contribution? How do I balance that? So I have my purpose, I have my fields, but I still feel I'm not fully bringing it to all. I bring it to many situations. Very often I kind of sneak out, I feel.
Yeah. To your work.
To my work, or yeah.
The spiritual who you really are in your work. Is that what you mean?
No, that I think I find it easier in the work. I mean, in when I do coaching or I'm in front of class, I'm very much in the flow. I enjoy it. How do I bring that to the family? How do I bring that to the day-to-day routines? That's
okay. All right. I get it. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask one more person, Melanie, because I haven't seen you for ages. What's the challenge you're working on?
Hey, Lisa, so good to see you. Well, it's actually really funny. I just screenshotted what I wrote to Thomas because my challenge was, how can I take my wise, generous, and untriggered self, which I often experience at work, more into home with
right. Isn't that funny?
And the partner.
Yeah. And that's so true, right? The biggest transformation, the biggest growth is always at home with the family, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read a few out others. Clear out, letting go of what no longer serves me. Thank you, Cynthia. Integrating spiritual conscious work with Lee is interesting. My sense of belonging to my country. Great. Thank you, everybody. So let's have that as a starting point. And what I want to do is just start sharing a little bit around values, why they're important, and why, when we're using values with culture change, they're so much more powerful than working with beliefs and thoughts and feelings. So I love Richard Barrett's quote where he says, values are the energetic containers of our aspirations. So within our values has the whole spectrum of who we could be. So whatever is our aspiration, even our purpose, our soul purpose, our higher self, whatever we're valuing at the moment is holding those aspirations. And it's always taking us on a journey. So how many people are familiar with the iceberg? My guess is everyone's going to put their hand up. Thank you. And hopefully we'll see something different in the iceberg that we play with. Thank you. So if we say a human being is like an iceberg, obviously, you know, we're only seeing the top 10%, which is our behaviors. And when this is the way that we use the iceberg model. So our thoughts and feelings drive our behaviors, our values and belief drives our thoughts. And most importantly, at the bottom of our iceberg is our needs. And whether through our life experience, our needs have been met or unmet. And when we talk about needs, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. And so I guess the first time I saw this, I really well, first of all, I didn't even know I had needs. I was living this life of everything was, you know, busy, achieve. And I had no idea that underneath my waterline at the bottom of the iceberg, there were needs that were met and unmet. And of course, whatever we experience in our life, especially from 0 to 7, when the rational brain had not yet developed, that whatever we experience, whether our needs were met or unmet, that life experience got laid into our emotional brain, right? Because we didn't have language yet. We only experienced something as pain or pleasure. So through my life experience, whether I was safe, whether I felt loved, or whether I felt good enough, whatever story that was, because I could not make meaning, I only experience as pain or pleasure. I move away from it or I move towards it. And that gets locked in our neural pathways as our beliefs. And from the belief forms what we value. And those beliefs serve us as accelerators. They help us achieve our goals, or they serve us as our brakes. And whatever those beliefs are, they drive how we think and we feel and what our behaviors are. So if I give you an example, in my life experience, I'm the youngest of 4 girls and a very dominant, aggressive, assertive mother. Does anybody else have one of these? Push, have to achieve. And also had a mother and father who were very unhappily married and screamed at each other all the time. And by the time I was born, I felt totally forgotten. And I remember being about the age of, maybe it was about 10 or 11, and we're all going out for dinner. I'm from Chicago. We're all going out for dinner, all dressed up. I'm at the bottom of the driveway, and I see my mother and father arguing, and my sisters are all among themselves, you know, totally caught up with themselves. They get in the car and they drive away. They totally forgot me. And the belief that I grew up with is there's no one there for me. That's the belief from a very young age. There's no one there for me. The value that became important to me was independence. Now that value, there's no one there for me, was a fantastic accelerator in my life, right? Very independent, opened up division offices all across the US, very high achieving, did a huge amount of things at a young age by myself because there's no one there for me. Now the break, so lots of positives of the way it's helped me. The breaks is getting feedback, nope. Team player, not really. Collaborating, nope. Now I had no awareness of these breaks. So here I am, you know, I'm 40, I'm 50 years old. I'm thinking, you know, I'm really kind of tired of working by myself. And I want to collaborate with other people, but every collaboration falls apart. And what do? I blame it on everybody else. It's their problem. And then I unpack my iceberg and I look down there and I see this belief, there's no one there for me. Guess what? I'm the one who's creating every one of my upsets. I had no idea. How could I collaborate with someone if I think everyone's going to leave me? I make sure I leave them before they leave me. Does anyone resonate with that? So this is the power of the iceberg, and most importantly, the realization that the values that are so important to me might be blocking my growth. And I'll make an assertion that the top values that we're holding right now are blocking your growth. And that's why we want to work with that challenge. Does that make sense? So any questions here before I move on? And feel free to raise your hand if you want. Okay, I don't see anything. Lindsay, I don't know if there is, but I might just keep going on. Okay. So let's go back to you. If you have a sheet of paper, write down, what do you feel are your top 3 values at the moment? And if we were with a client, we would have them take the top values exercise that Barrett Value Center has, but here's a list. And if the values aren't in there, just make them up. Whatever's really important to you. If it's not in this list, just write down, what are your top 3 values right now in your life? And we often get the question, do your values change? The answer is yes. I also want to say, if you have questions while I'm talking, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and Malcolm will also be monitoring that, and he can answer you, which will be separately from the whole group. And if you have a minute, just put them in the chat box. I'm just curious to see what are some of the values that you're holding. Dan, I'm just looking at your challenge. That's great. Sometimes people say, are these my real values or are they aspirational? It's probably mostly aspirational, but that's okay. You'll still get the depth from it. Okay, can I move on? All right, so you got your top 3 values. So what I want to do now is share a roadmap, which is the Barrett 7 levels of consciousness model. How many people are familiar with this? A lot? Good. All right. So I'm going to go through the 7 levels framework to give an idea for you to start sensing, how do my values sit within the framework? And what does it say about me, about where I am and where I want to be? And you might also start seeing your challenge in the framework. And wherever you feel that you are, you can see how the next level of growth is sitting before you. So what Richard Barrett did was he took Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which were motivations, and he correlated that with consciousness or levels of awareness. Because the big idea is that my needs are driving my values, right? We saw that in the iceberg. Whatever are my perceived unmet needs, and I'm using the word perceived on purpose, is driving my values. And so the Maslow hierarchy of safety, love, belonging, and self-esteem, Barrett has as levels 1, 2, and 3. And then he takes the self-actualization from Maslow and he expands it to give us a description of what does that mean to be self-actualized. And for those people who are familiar with adult stages of development research, the Keegan and Bob Anderson work, it correlates perfectly to the Barrett model. And what I do is I use that work as the validated research that sits behind the Barrett model. So let's jump into the 7 levels, okay? Now you have your 3 values next to you, so you can start seeing where they're going to sit. So if I'm sitting in the first level of consciousness, it's all about survival. So I basically just need to exist. My personal values might be around safety or health, but just from the place of I'm either going to exist or not exist. The red words are if I have so much fear that I'm not going to be safe, then these potentially limiting behaviors come out, or values. So it's not that they're values, but what you can see is I am valuing being in control. Okay. So at the personal level, I'm going to value things because my fear is I might not be safe. At the organizational level, the same thing is we can't function unless we have profit in the organization, that we're looking after shareholders, and safety at a very basic level. But typically when we see people in full control, that's a level 1. Now, there'll be moments in our life when you think about COVID, right? A lot of us went back to level 1. I did go out and buy toilet paper. I was triggered around safety. So there will be moments in your life that, lack of abundance. If I do, my whole family experience is lack of abundance. So generationally, we also, adopt the values from our family history unconsciously. Make sense? So if my needs are met at level 1, the next level is all about love and belonging. And this is typically developed in our teenage years. Think about I have to be popular or I have to belong. That's where it all gets settled. So I coach a lot of people who have been bullied, and their belief, of unmet needs was often formed then. So those beliefs have formed what they value. A lot of the fairness, probably 30% of the people we work with, they have the value of fairness. That comes from this level 2, where something from a relationship perspective happened in their life experience, that I was bullied, I didn't belong, I was excluded, something like that creates the values that are important to us. And we go through life and I'm still fighting this fight, and they have no idea why they're fighting it, because it was formed from our life experience. So the values here are all relationship, but it's very much win-lose. Like I need you to get my needs met. At the organizational level, it's like every organization has its people and it needs to create the open space for people. But again, it's not necessarily treating them as full human beings. Okay. So if that level is met, then the next level of development is what he calls level 3, which is around performance. And it's around every, think about yourself in your 20s. Of course, you want to prove yourself. You want to be good at something. You want to become an expert in something. And so the personal values here is all around being recognized, feeling confident. I have to achieve success. And then the potentially limiting, like arrogance and perfectionism. I remember the first time I saw this level 3, and there are all these red ones. And I looked at that, I was like, what's wrong with this? It's like, why are they red? This is what I was brought up to be. Like, I didn't know there was anything more. Like growing up in America, it's like, you're just supposed to be successful. It's like, okay, what do you do after that? And so I just laughed when I saw there was a level 4 to 7, but I didn't know there was one. At the organizational level, performance is all around being able to execute systems, processes, right? Which is all good stuff. So level 1, 2, 3, remember, they're positive values that are being built. But if my needs are not met, if that fear is still in me, then the shadow side comes out. So level 1 to 3 is all about the ego. And if we were talking Keegan language, it would be socialized mind, right? I get my sense of self from the external. I'm only happy if you tell me I am, right? External validation. So what happens after level 3, if we get to level 4, there's a time in our life, as many of you will know, that's why you're in this work, I'm sure, what got me here won't get me there. Right? There's some type of upset, breakdown, divorce, health scare, something that wakes us up that there has to be more. How many people have experienced some type of upset in their life, challenge, where it really challenged their whole way of being? Yeah, and that's why we're in this work, right? So you can see that the values change tremendously. To truly go through transformation, they used to call this transformation, they're now calling it evolution. I still like transformation. Because it really takes courage. It's the moment you stand on the balcony and you say, how am I part of this problem? Because past level 3, we can no longer be victim or blame or in judgment. Level 4 is the level of transformation. So our values change. You can even feel how these values change, right? Personal growth, balance. And at the organizational level, it's the same thing. What got us here won't get us there. There's not one organization on the planet that is not in this level of, wants to be in this level of consciousness, right? Agile, adaptive leadership, empowerment, innovation, diversity. It's like there's this explosion. There's this awareness that we need to be like this. But what people don't realize is the leaders need to be here in order to bring the organization up. So level 4 is the beginning of self-actualization and asking, who am I? And level 5 is really the point when we ask, who am I and why am I here? Level 4, can you see how the level 4 is the transformation where we're asking for feedback, we're moving through our fears. And level 5 is when you ask the question, it's almost like the true self comes out. When you think about yourself, when you're at your most fulfilled, this is level 5. Whatever of your values comes out. And that's why it has like creativity, enthusiasm. So this is authenticity. Because we're moving past our fears, we have the courage to be who we really are. At the organizational level, it's around shared purpose, shared values, being in integrity. And you can also see here how the leadership changes. So level 5 is I'm internally within me about who I really am. And I'm focused on my sense of purpose and meaning. And level 6 is expressing that externally. So if I'm living in my purpose internally, your whole world changes outside. So the kind of high level 3, 4, 5 is what Keegan would call self-authoring mind, right? Where I self-author my reality. Whereas the level high 5, 6, and 7 would be the self-transforming mind. The more systemic perspective, the ability to see the perfection in every moment, to realize that I'm attracting the upsets for my greatest growth. So level 6 is the higher level 2. Remember, level 2 was relationship. It was the win-lose. Level 6 is the win-win. It's the letting go of the fear, the letting go of the attachment, and holding the space for something greater. That's emergence, if you're into theory U. Yeah. And finally, level 7 is, again, this used to be called service, which I think would resonate with you guys. It's truly being of service, unity consciousness, but also not to say that you have to be, I remember the first time I heard unity consciousness, I was like, what is that? Because there's moments like, we all have moments of humility, compassion, we have moments of it, right? So we might not have to be Nelson Mandela, but what I believe is level 7 is who we truly are, right? When you think of, if you think of us like an onion, you know, we have the fears outside of us, and as we unpack it, who we really are at the core is level 7. At the organizational level, it's the long-term future generations being of service to the world. Now, the big idea here is that level 7 is not better than level 1. Especially many of us in this profession, we love the 6 and 7, right? And then we have no money and, you know, loads of shadow at 1, 2, and 3, right? We know lots of, you know, helping profession at 6 and 7 who have no money and no relationships, right? So don't make one better than the other. 1, 2, 3 is a nice, solid foundation, which gives us the foundation for expansion. So level 7 is not better than level 1. The research shows that the highest performing leaders in organizations are ones that are full spectrum. They have values at every level, right? So whatever happens contextual wise, we can go down to, we can service from a level 2, we can be performing, we can be adaptive. And the last big idea, and this is really why I love this model, is that we yo-yo up and down this thing, right? We might be at level 5 and some upset happens. What happens? We go right back to 1, 2, 3, where this old fear and this old story sits. So I'll share with you what happened for me. Maybe it was 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I can't remember. You know, I was doing this work, traveling the world, thinking, oh my God, I'm in my purpose. And I probably thought I was in level 5, you know, living my purpose. And a friend of mine had a heart attack, John. And I said to him, I said, you know, was it a big wake up call? And what did you realize? And he said, my realization was not to wait till tomorrow, what you could do today. And he was thinking, giving money to his kids, you know, don't wait till you're 80 because you could die tomorrow, right? So I said to Malcolm, I said, you know, if I died tomorrow, I feel like I really made a difference in the world. But the one thing I feel regret about is that I wasn't there for my sisters and her kids growing up. And he said, well, why don't you go home? Go home for, you know, go home for a summer. And because I've been away for 30 years from Chicago. And I left, you heard my other story, because I was pissed off with everybody that nobody understood me. So Malcolm said, go home. So I go home for the summer, first time ever that I spent more than a week in Chicago. So I rented this apartment, go see my mother, and she said, oh, it's, you know, she's so happy to see me. Can you take me to the doctor? Because she had some hip problems. So I took her to the physio and I did the stuff. And about a week later, she calls me and my 3 sisters, and she said, I'm calling you to the apartment. I have something to tell you. She sits us down on the couch and she said, I've just been to the doctor and I've been diagnosed with lung cancer. And I've got 3 months to live. The one time I go back. So I move in with her and she goes down very quickly. And she starts having these psychotic experience. I don't know if it was the drugs or the cancer, but she started having psychotic experience and she's yelling and screaming in the night and going in to see her. And after like a week, I couldn't even function because I was there 24/7. And it brought me right back to level 2 when I was a teenager and all my sisters had left and I had to deal with my parents when they were screaming and yelling and my dad was alcoholic. And I was there and I had to be there for my mother. So this experience brought me right back to being a child with all my stuff coming up. And I had to be there for her. I couldn't let her down. And my sister pulls me out of the house after a week and she says, Lisa, you can't be her carer. Because I looked a mess. And she said, you come stay with me and we'll all go see my mother, every day. And my sisters and I sat around the bed every single day. She went down very quickly. And it was the most beautiful experience that I've ever had. This intense experience of love. And I got to the airport and I had this major realization that I had always been loved. And so this is what the 7 levels does, is we have some big upset. It doesn't always have to be big. This was a big upset for me. It brings us down to an old wound that has never been healed. And I had been living my whole life that no one loved me, or my family didn't love me. And through this experience, the insight that I had was that I had always been loved. And I go back to Perth, and my client at KPMG, he says to me, he says, Lisa, something's different in you. He said, you're able to collaborate with people. So can you see what happens? The reason I couldn't collaborate was because of my old belief and my old story that there's no one there for me. And in this 30 years later, 40 years later, I have this insight that I thought was a huge upset, which was absolutely the biggest gift for me in my life. And that's this is what happens in the 7 levels. We have an upset, and that's why I'm asking you about your challenge. We have an upset, and it triggers us to go back to an old belief that's stuck there. Now, I could have blamed my sisters and blamed everybody and then recreated that for another 30 years. But maybe because it was that experience of love that this insight came to me. And that's the opportunity we have in every single upset. So that's what I'm going to share during the 4 days at the NPI, is how do you make that shift? But I just want to share with you the 7 levels and the power of it to go, so where am I now? And when I'm triggered, whatever challenge you wrote in that box, what's the belief that you're struggling with? And what level of consciousness is at it? So before I move on, any insights or questions? And does that all make sense to you? Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question or an insight or something you'd like to share with the group. I'll see your hand raised if you raise it. Carla.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
I can. I can't see your face, but I see your name.
No, because the connection is very bad, so I'm just keeping it like this.
Yeah.
So I just have a question, which is a curiosity in the sense that, given that you described the model like in an evolution term, how come that if you do this, for instance, in school with even teenagers or even young adults, you have many values that are on the upper levels?
Oh, good question. Well, a lot of this younger generation is coming in at 6 and 7 values. But the same thing applies, that when we're triggered and when we're stuck, it will always go back to the lower levels. And the interesting thing is when we work with Aboriginal leaders here in Australia, and we've actually trained some of them, some of the senior leaders in the group, they do the 7 levels starting at level 7, starting at unity consciousness. That's how they're raised. That they're one with the universe and the earth, and they go from 7 to 1. So, and maybe that's how some of the new generations are coming in. Thanks, Carla. Lee.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I love what you just shared. And my question's around this: facilitate a moment of awareness of what the underlying issue is. And I think about the amount of inner work that it requires to move through the situation, because it's a chain of reactions in reality, because it's always working with a team. Could you say a little more around from the moment of awareness, but then how you would move through this, because each moment is a decision in reality?
So that's a big question. When we start with teams and leaders, it takes a while for people to really understand what belief they have, and that's really what we're helping, and what's under that to get to that belief. And the how is really, I don't know if I could do it in an hour and a half, but the how, once you have the belief, we go back to Viktor Frankl and the meaning, what's the gift in this for me? How's the upset a setup? But, we create the experience. Really what we're doing when we're doing the workshop is we're creating the safety for the onion to be unpeeled, where people can connect with their own awareness. Because ultimately the biggest idea is that we are source. One of the things I'm passionate about is for people to realize they have all the answers within, and the answers are within their values. Because we could work with beliefs, but really beliefs are of the ego, whereas the values are of the soul. So the more that we're working with the soul, the more we're working with the values. Ultimately, the values is your true self. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Lee, but I think the answer to your second part of it is the bigger process that I would go through during the NPI.
Thank you.
And Thomas, last one.
Thanks, Lisa. First of all, for sharing it. I think I heard you doing it 3 times, but it always touches me to get some new nuances of the story. So my question is, if I look at Barrett values, a value contains a lot, and it still feels a bit cognitive to me. So I realized when I looked at the list, I was looking for the right words, and I didn't find them, which would resonate with me closer to what I feel is my purpose, because there is a list. If you now compare that to an approach, trauma-informed approach, there one starts always with a feeling. And how would you see those two approaches working together, or being complementary, or not being complementary because they're the same? I don't know. What's your point there?
Yeah, well, they're absolutely complementary. The values is the entry point for me, because most people, I know when I started, I didn't even feel anything. I was cut off from my head, and most leaders, most business leaders are. So if you had asked me what I feel, I'd probably not say not much. So what I love about the values work is it's the entry point that everyone's passionate about their values. And then we start unpacking them. And then we ask, especially with the trigger, where's that feeling in your body? And all the Thomas Hubel work is completely resonant with this. Because the more that you feel, the more the true belief comes up. Right? Because I know, when you started FTV years ago, you're probably at a completely different level now with what you feel, right? Because of the trauma work. Mm-hmm. And so, and the big part of the work that we do is, if we put this belief aside, not to make it wrong, but put the belief aside, who would you be? And then your true self comes out, and then it speaks. That's the beautiful part of the iceberg coaching process. Is we're helping people unpack to actually see what's in there, and then to acknowledge what is, which is also constellation work. What we're doing in that iceberg piece is just going, what is the belief? What's the value? Most people don't even know when they're triggered that they're triggering a value, that they're in conflict with their top values. They're out of integrity with who they want to be. That's what's beautiful about the values. And then we get down to, so what need are you trying to get met? And that, I'd probably say like Thomas Hübel's work goes deeper into the feeling, but for most leaders to unpack and realize the life story that's led to this belief, and then you say, is it true? Is that belief true?
I love it because we always argue the work we do for business is presented in a very scientific, analytical way because that speaks to their world. Yeah. Now you gave me another reason why we're doing values in the beginning, because you know, a lot are not in their feeling. If you ask how you feel, you get the usual tired, good, whatever answers. So it's for me a beautiful entryway to meet them in their world, because they are able to talk about values and they're able to have a good conversation on that. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, the next exercise we're going to do, if you bring that to your leaders, it is every time we do that in every single workshop, the room drops. That's what you want. And when the room drops, people start connecting with their true self. They can connect to their feelings, but the whole energy of the whole room changes. So thank you for the question. Let's jump into doing that. So this whole idea of yo-yo is something I want, you know, to stick with you. So this was really just to show you the correlation with Keegan and Anderson. So let's do a workshop. We're now going to connect to your top. Oh, by the way, Thomas, in answer to your questions, you know, my experience is the more we do work on ourselves, the more those values words don't resonate. So what I've started to do is I've started to add in my own values list. Like I have a value now of just being. That's my value. It's the first value I've had in 20 years that isn't secretly about achieving. All right. So what I'd like you to do is take a piece of paper and do the same exercise I told you about around the iceberg. I'm giving you enough. You're going to put your top 3 values there. For each value, reflect on, why is this value so important to you? You know, you're trying to surface this unconscious belief of why it's really important. Okay, it's not a definition of the value, it's why it's so important to you. And then how does that belief act as an accelerator for you in your life? And how does that belief act as a brake? So I'm giving you another Lisa example. Success. Oops. I had the belief I have to prove to others that I can be the best. How does that belief act as an accelerator? Well, maybe very successful, achieved lots of stuff. How does that belief act as a brake? Well, people felt I was competitive and I wasn't a team player. Okay, so we're going to give you about 10 minutes to reflect on this exercise. And if you have any questions during it, put it in the Q&A, and Malcolm and potentially Renu, if there's an overflow, will answer them for you. So Betsy, with your question about connection or belonging, just put connection. Obviously, it's not on the list, but just put whatever value you feel it is. Presentness, I like that. Hello, Valletta. Yes, Carissa, the Byron Katie, that question, that is where I get it from. Has anyone finished? Is anyone super achievement focused? Because we could go into breakouts and just have kind of 5 or 10 minutes with another person. If anyone's finished. Give me thumbs up if you'd like to do that. Yeah, okay. So Lindsay, are you still there?
I'm here.
Great. So people who maybe just raise your hand, put the hand signal thing up if you'd like to go into a breakout with another person. So the question will be, what insights have you gotten from looking at your 3 values? Okay, so it's not a description of everything you wrote, but what are your insights? Okay, so we'll come back at 10 past the hour. And if you want to go into a breakout, the question is, what are your insights when you look at all 3? Great. Anne, do you have any questions or insights you want to share?
Yes, Lisa. Is it just us or are other people?
Everybody's here. You got like 15 people here.
Okay. I can't seem to find any breaks on my values.
What's the value?
Diversity, integrity, and vitality. So my brain hasn't turned around to be able to see the downsides or.
Yeah. Okay. So how much would you say you're living the value of diversity from a scale of 0 to 10? How much are you living that in all areas of your life, at work, at home, and with yourself?
Probably an 8, 7 to 8.
Okay. And what would be different if you were a 10? What would be different?
I would embrace what's really hard for me.
So what's the belief that keeps you at the 8, not a 10?
That the other the part that I can't embrace compromises my values.
There you go. There's your break belief. A part of myself that I can't embrace.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the belief? Yeah.
The part of myself I can't embrace. I mean, can I work on that?
Well, what's the belief of why you're not a 10?
Because I can't accept other values outside of my own system.
There you go. So you're in judgment.
I'm in judgment. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what I say is if you're 10 out of 10, then there are no beliefs. There are no break beliefs because you are living the value in its full essence. Right. And so what we're trying to delineate in the break belief is what's that unconscious part I don't want to see, but it keeps creating triggers in your life and it keeps creating upsets. And so that's the piece of transformation.
Okay, that was great. So that breakdown was really helpful. How much are you living in this value? Right? What would it take to be fully? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you
so much. In the way. Yeah. Because often compassion, people go, "What's wrong with that?" I don't see anything wrong with that. And I said, how much are you living it at work, at home, and with self? And they're like, "Oh, self. Oh, yes."
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Lots of smiles. All right. Hopefully there were lots of insights. Can I hear from, just put the raise hand caption thing. I'd love to hear just a few insights before we bring it all together. What was your biggest insight from looking at your top 3 values? Yeah, Betsy.
So I was sharing, I just wrote, sorry. I was sharing with Sophia that I have been in this period, a kind of long period of pretty intentional transition. And I have a value around growth in that I have enormous energy for people and organizations that are interested in doing that hard, honest work with themselves, and a lot of heartache and frustration around being in environments where that is not a shared value. And there's a whole story around that I've done a lot of thinking about. But the thing that was sort of making me giggle this morning as an awareness was my relationship with the idea that I have to work hard for the growth all the time. The notion of like just letting it come is.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
And yeah, that's the thing about, it's actually a thing about all of us doing this work is like, when will I get there? Right? When will I be good enough, smart enough? And yeah, and when you truly live growth without the unmet need that's driving it, growth then becomes integrated into who you are, but it's not your top 3 values. So there's a big concept here that we learned from John DeMartini, which I found very challenging when I first heard it. He said, whatever you call out as your number 1 value is where your biggest perceived void is, or missingness. So with growth, what would be your perceived void?
Well, I'm not sure if this is the right answer. I'm pretty sure this is not the right answer, but it's what's coming to mind, which is the flip side of that coin for me, the hard work to keep moving along, like not let myself off the hook for just being complacent with X, Y, or Z, certainly interferes with the ability to be spacious, present, like grateful, all that kind of stuff.
Because the belief underneath it all is you're not enough yet.
And
or something like that.
And yes, and like a Rolling Stone gathers no moss kind of thing. Like if like I was very much brought up, I'm trying to say this succinctly. I was very much brought up that if you don't work hard for it, it doesn't count. So this whole notion now that I'm in the world of leadership and coaching about flow and ease, like when I first encountered that years ago, I was like, I really wonder what that must be like for those like lazy people giving themselves that excuse, right? So it was a foreign concept to me.
Yes. You've highlighted, thank you so much. You've highlighted so many things around values. So one is this idea that whatever you're calling out as your number 1 value is where you perceive you're not whole. And that's why it's your number 1. It's like, what part of you chose that number 1 value? That's what I love about the list, is like something popped out and you chose that because at some level, that's where your greatest growth is. And that's where your greatest upset will be in your life. How many people can see that whatever new insights they've had from their top 3 values around their beliefs, how many people can see it linked with their biggest challenge? Great. That's the so what of this. Fantastic. The other thing you highlighted, Betsy, thank you very much, was that whatever we have as our break belief is a judgment of self or others. And we have a pattern, right? How many of us judge ourselves? How many people in your beliefs, your dominant beliefs was, I'm not good enough, I'll never, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Or we do the other, where we blame others, we judge others, right? They're lazy, they're not good enough. Okay. They're all coming from the same unmet need. Great. Let's get one more. Who had their hand up? Anne, do you want to share the one that we talked about?
Sure. So my one of my values was diversity, and I was talking with Lisa and saying that I couldn't find the downside in it, couldn't imagine what the break could be. And Lisa, you asked me, how much are you practicing this on a scale of 1 to 10? And I thought, well, if I'm honest, a 7 to 8, and that's great because there's all this other growth for me. And then your question, what would happen if you were acting as a 10? And at this point, it would really compromise my values. I couldn't see how to do it. And Lisa said, well, then you're living in judgment. And that was a real bingo. Absolutely. Yes, I am. And therein lies my challenge.
Yep. Biggest growth. Yeah. So I'm going to I'm going to summarize some of the so what of this very simple exercise. Hopefully you have some insights here. So the first big idea around values, breaks and beliefs, beliefs and breaks, is whenever we have a break belief, it's always a judgment of self or others. So there already is my greatest growth. This big idea that whatever I'm calling out as my number one value is where I perceive there's something missing. And I'm purposely saying perceive, because it's not truth from a higher reality. But how many people can see what the number one value they wrote? They can see they perceive something's missing in them. Great. How many people had the same break belief for 2 or 3 of their values? It's the same story, just being played out in different values. How many people can see that? Yeah. Right? So what does that say? So Annika, when you raised your hand, what does that say to you?
Well, have a topic here. I know it. I had joy as number 1. And I'm living a summer full of joy. And guess what? I have bad consciousness in between. You know, I was like, you know, I should do more work. I should prepare workshop. I should do this. Incredible. Yeah.
It's
but
incredible.
I'm actually living my number 1 value. I'm living it right now. And I still cannot enjoy it fully and always need to do something in between to justify it.
Yeah. And you're not allowed to just have joy.
Exactly.
Right.
So my mother's here, he was 87. And one of the beliefs is always do something productive or something significant. Yeah. Then you're worthy of love.
Yeah. And so, of course, it's endless.
Yeah.
But what you're pursuing now is your true self, of course, wants to be seen and heard and felt. And so it's giving you this upset and this challenge in order for you to step fully in.
Mm. Absolutely. And I loved your link, what you said, that values are a bit the language of the soul, because we just pick it unconsciously very quickly. So it just, you know, resonates in that moment, could be different tomorrow. And then I start thinking, the belief, and I can feel I go up to the head, and then comes the ego thing again and the judgment.
Yeah. So let me ask you something. What's the belief? So the belief around joy is I can't what? Or I'm not allowed to. What does your belief sound like?
Well, the belief linked to the joy is more the breaking belief. It's like I have to be productive or do something significant in order to be worthy of love. And
okay, so let me ask
accelerating. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. If you take that belief, just close your eyes for a moment. And if you take that belief, I have to be productive in order to be worthy, just put it aside for a moment. Next room. You can pick it up later if you like. Okay. And connect with your heart and ask your heart, who would I be without this belief? Let your heart speak. What comes? Put the belief aside. Who would I be?
Well, a calmer, slower person in the being, not in the doing. Yeah.
So that's the beginning of connecting with your true self. Thank you.
I know that, it's not new. I know it, but it's the first time I put joy now really as number 1.
Yeah, which is a level 7 value. All right, thank you. So that's we have this one. How many people have their values are in conflict with each other? How many people might have like achievement and family and they feel they're in conflict? Yeah. And so again, we're looking at what's the belief that's in conflict. You know, what's the belief where I feel I can't have both? And that's your greatest growth. And the other part is look at your hierarchy. So often I work with leaders where it's like fairness, equality, and making a difference. And so you could feel in the fairness and the equality, there's so much anger and drive and, you know, life story of not being fair. And they're stuck in this quagmire of, you know, the kind of level 2 consciousness. And I said, what would happen if you put making a difference number 1? It would shift everything. So just know that you have choice about the hierarchy you're choosing to put it in. And finally, I just, you know, want to wrap this up together and to say, can you see how the break beliefs are the answer to how do we unlock our biggest challenge, right? So there's an old story at the bottom of our iceberg of a life experience that's formed a belief. And that's our power, is to shift that belief. We look at how it served us, all the drawbacks, because that's what holds it in place, but turn the coin around. And who have I become as a result of that belief? All this challenging life experience most of us have had. What are the benefits of having that life experience? I became more empathetic. I became more connected. I came into this work. I help other people. Who have I become as a result of this life experience? And your heart knows who that is. So I'd love to continue to chat to you guys and go through every single person's insights, but I hope I've given you enough insight around the power of values. So just to wrap up, these are the big takeaways that I hope you can resonate with. Whatever we're calling out as our top 3 values at this time in my life are signposts to our greatest growth. The upsets and the challenges that are in my life right now are challenging my values. I'm not able to live them 100%. And when I can surface that belief of what's in the way, that's my transformation. Our current challenges, if we're going to truly be at mastery, are there for us to evolve. We can't be a victim and blame and etc. So every single challenge is a setup for our growth. And the part of us that has set us up is our soul. When we live the value fully, at work, at home, and with self, when I'm living that 10 out of 10, I'm living the value in its full essence. The full essence is level 7. Every value, when lived at level 7, is an expression of love. And that's the journey of our life journey. The values are really an expression of love. And when we activate that, we liberate ourselves and the whole system. Thank you. So I hope you come to Boston in October. I'd love to go through the whole 4 days to have a full transformation. And I'd love it if you just put in the chat box, what have been your insights? You know, what are you leaving with as you leave today? And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Great, Carney. Thank you. Hope to see you.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, Lisa. It was so great to have a breakthrough in a very short time.
That's what you do with values. You have a breakthrough in a short amount of time.
Yeah,
great.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hope to see you. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Thomas, for coming. Melanie, great to see you. Thanks, Renu.
Thank you, Lisa.
Great to see
Bye,
you.
Malcolm. Bye-bye again. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It was wonderful meeting you finally.
Yes, same.
See you again soon.
One day. Yes, definitely. Thanks,
Bye.
Silvana. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thanks, Suzanne. Oh, Suzanne, I've been at your course. I just saw her there. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm sorry I
Lovely to
won't
meet
be
you.
in Boston, but lovely to meet you. I hope to see
Thanks,
you. Another
Carlo.
day. Goodbye. Ciao, Malcolm.
Super.